Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 5th, 2017 General Meeting of the Bloomfield Hills Board of Education. Dr. Asst, can you take attendance, please?
Yes, all board members are present except Mr. Pelletier.
Mr. Pelletier had a business commitment tonight. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, dear. Before we get started tonight, I'd like us to just take a minute and ask for a moment of silence and recognition of the shootout in Las Vegas earlier this week for the families and community folks, but we're having fun at a music festival whose lives were cut short, and I'd like to just take a minute in recognition. We are fortunate to live in a wonderful community that is supportive of all of our citizens, and we've had a wonderful start to our school year. We have students doing great things both in athletics, in the arts, and exciting new programs going on in our schools, and I hope that you all have a chance to visit and see some of the exciting things that are happening. Particularly, I want to call your attention to an activity that's coming up on October the 14th and 15th. Vicki, I think you have a slide for me. So we're at the Bowers School Farm. We will be having our big fall festival, and it will be a unique new experience this year. It's a little bit different than what we've been doing in the past. I'm going to haunt you in October.
There's been a disturbance in the force.
It's going to be from 12 to 6 on both Saturday and Sunday, and they're hoping to have a great turnout. They'll have wagon rides and pony rides. They'll have a bouncy house, food trucks, music. It's going to be a great time, a chance to go through our barns and see our animals and really see what a unique property we have to help our students learn about real world and where food comes from. It's a wonderful asset that is part of our school district that we're very proud to celebrate. So I hope you can join us and come out and have some fun at our fall festival. I also want to be sure that you know that the first meeting for this year for our Diversity, Academic Equity, and Race Relations Task Force will be happening on October the 24th, right here in this room at 6:30. It's our kickoff for the year, and especially considering all of the issues that are floating around in our world today, I think it is important for us to come together as a community to support all of our residents, all of our students, and work together to make our community a better place for all. Also wanted to notice that in today's Eagle, there is a wonderful article about Bloomfield Hills Schools receives an arts grant, and for the 4th year, we are receiving $12,000 in a grant from Michigan Council for the Arts to support art programs for children with disabilities, and it's a wonderful program for our students, so that's a great thing to celebrate today. And I think that's all I have right now. Dr. Glass, would you like to give your report?
Sure, just give you an update on a few things. We're entering our completing our 5th week of school already. Moves very fast. But as you indicated, Madam President, it has been a very smooth start to the year. I'm so pleased with our teachers, our students, our families working so well together, and it's just been a great start to the school year, very remarkable. We're continuing to stay focused on our goals, literacy. We're continuing to stay focused on our goal around building teacher leadership And around another one that we're working on is developing service standards across the district, and that's already kicked off and is going really, really well. So on October 26th, our next board meeting, we will be having a little bit of a report on some of our metrics and outcomes around our goals. So we're looking forward to giving those to you. Last Sunday for me was an open house that we combined with Bloomfield Township, and I know several of you were there. Mr. Barron was there, and I think several others. You were there too, Jackie. So what a great event it was, and you can attest if you saw it, if you were there. So this is something that we've been doing now a couple of years in a row, and I want to thank Shira Good, Lauren Diamond, Kathy Badalamenti, Sally Elmore, and Sarah Faulkner for their role in setting this all up. But there were just all kinds of people there, families, young children, you name it, and experiencing all that we have here in the township and experiencing all that we have in the school. In the district, there was a marching band was out in the front of the high school, and then we had students giving tours of our learning communities. It was just great. It was just a great event. I want to thank everybody who worked so hard on that. Had our first ever Superintendent Dialogue, first for this year ever, Superintendent Dialogue. We usually have one or two at every school across the district throughout the year. Our first one was at Eastover. It was just a great dialogue. And really, I learned so much from these because the dialogue flows both ways, and I end up getting information almost every time that I really maybe didn't expect. And I make notes on that, and I use that as sort of a focus group piece of data to make decisions, to think about what decisions we might make. And so I got some good information from them. One of the things that really wasn't surprising at all was how well the transition of the fourth grade going from Eastover to East Hills really, really went, and how that has opened up space and really changed somewhat the feel of the school building. It doesn't feel so crowded now there, and it's going very well in both buildings. So I'm very pleased about that, and was glad to hear about that. But then I learned a few other things too that I guess I wasn't expecting to hear that were really great, really constructive, really things to think about for the future, good ideas. So I thank our parents for taking the time to be there, and our administrators there for setting that up. So it was great. Count Day was yesterday. Now on Count Day, you want all your students to attend because that's how your funding is based, and if students don't attend on that day, we have to verify individually whether they're there. So 98% of our students were in attendance yesterday. That's a very high number, and I thank everybody for making an effort to make that happen. So far, our enrollment numbers are not official, but they're looking pretty good as projected, so we're happy about that. And then congrats to our Bloomfield Hills High School boys tennis team. I understand they won leagues today. Thanks to Mr. Colin, Vice President Colin, for making that known on Twitter so that we could stay abreast on it. He's been doing a great job covering a lot of our sports. And so next week, we have West Hills, their 50th anniversary celebration. That will be on Monday, October 9th at 9:45. Really excited about that. 50 years in existence. They're going to celebrate that. And also Way just recently celebrated their 50th as well. I was out of town and unable to attend that Friday evening event, but it was a wonderful event. So we've got... It was packed. I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. And also that same event at West Hills is going to kick off Make a Difference Day for them. So that'll be great. A lot of our schools are doing a lot with Make a Difference Day, I know. I want to address real quickly a question that I get frequently, and I'm getting it all over the place, so I figured this is a good time for anyone who's watching to get some information. I'm getting a lot of questions about the Lasser property and what's happening with that. We've been demolishing the north half of it, essentially. That's coming to a conclusion now. So there will be a fence up around the grassing area there, probably for the winter, till the grass can be established in the spring. And we're continuing to use that southern half for our robotics program. And we have the other elements available to us, the indoor spaces for athletics and recreation, and that includes the auditorium. So all that's there. We're going to hold on to that for the time being and see if we can find some ways to. It's a built asset. It works well for us. But I think the big question driving residents who are asking me these questions really probably are they wondering, are we going to sell it or are we going to develop something there that's different or larger? And the answer is no. At this time, our intention is just to grass that field and have it available like all of our other school fields, and to operate the half that remains, as it serves our needs and serves the community's needs. And we are looking in time to see what we can do, maybe with that property to make it a little more useful or attractive. But, as everybody knows, this was an effort to take inventory of property and sort of take unused property and make sure it's not costing us a lot of money to operate. What we've done by doing this is to take the best part of the built assets and hold on to them and run and operate them at reasonable cost as needed, and yet get rid of a lot of overhead on the other areas where we had excess capacity. But I just want to assure people that there will be no construction in the foreseeable future. There are no plans to do anything except put grass there. So that may help some folks who had questions about that. And lastly, I want to let everybody know that today is International Teachers Day. And since 1994, this event has commemorated teacher organizations around the world and to ensure that the needs of future generations will continue to be met by teachers. So it's a way to appreciate our teachers on this day and every day, hopefully. We want to make sure that our teachers know that they are appreciated, and very much so, for the work that they do. So thank you, Mary. That's all. Thank you.
Very good. All right, at this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Al-Sayed to lead us on the consent agenda, please.
Sure. I move that the Board of Education approve the recommendations detailed in the consent agenda as follows. Request to approve minutes, study session of September 14th, 2017. Request to approve minutes, regular meeting of September 14th, 2017. Approve contract extension for Barton Malow Company. Approve contract extension with French Associates Incorporated. Request to approve HR actions.
Support.
Support from Mr. Cullen. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. All right, at this time, I'd like to invite Shira Good to come forward and share our community survey overview.
As she's walking up, I'll just kind of tee it up here. As you know, our community took a survey in the spring. We're here to share some highlights of those results, and particularly shed some light on how we use those results in making decisions and future planning here within the district. And I will say that this is with an eye toward us trying to really use small data, if you will, to try to make informed decisions. We're really trying to get good at that. So take it away, Shira.
Okay, all right, good. So as Rob said, I'm going to present the community survey to you. This is our second year doing our own survey through a platform that's called Qualtrics. Through that platform, we're able to build a variety of surveys. So it's affording us the opportunity to dig into data more often. I found this quote and I really enjoyed it. Most of the world will make decisions by either guessing or using their gut. They will either be lucky or wrong. So we don't want to make decisions by guessing or using our gut. We want to make decisions based on data, based on feedback, based on community and stakeholder engagement and feedback. So to give you some background information in terms of how accurate the survey results are, we were fortunate we had about the same turnout as last year on the survey, which gave us a 95 to 100% accuracy rating. About 62% were parents or guardians, 27% staff, 7.5% were graduates, and 15% were residents without children. It's a little bit about age and gender, so 72% female, and then you can see the age split. So right in that parent to beginning senior older resident age. So really kind of where we would want to see the results coming in. But certainly nice to see some in the 18 to 24 indicating those recent graduates or recent move-ins. Families who took time to answer the survey, it was not just our families, which is a wonderful thing to see. So the families who took time to complete this survey represents over 100 private school children that reside within our district but elect private school, charter and homeschool families, Over 60 not yet school-age children were represented in this survey. So that's exciting to see, both from getting their perspective, but also to see that there are those children in the district, and we're eager to have them here in Bloomfield Hills Schools. And then also families representing approximately 150 graduates. So what I'm going to do for most of our slides is show you side-by-side comparison. 2016 data will be in green, 2017 will be in blue. So you can see that we had slightly less participation for parents or guardians, but we had more participation for staff, and then more participation from those who identified as residents. In terms of age group, pretty stable, but a little bit of difference here in that 35 to 44 and 45 to 54. Please tell us how long you've had children attending Bloomfield Hills schools. So you can see that remained pretty consistent as well, but we did see an increase in that 6 to 10 years, which is great. You kind of hope to see that, that they're here a little bit longer, last year's group. How many children do you have in the following categories? So we can break it down a little further and find out how many they have with us, how many they have attending charter school, homeschool, graduated elsewhere, so on and so forth. And then in which schools do you currently have children? So all you really need to get here is that it's fairly consistent year over year, and there's a really nice distribution between schools. So it's not like we saw huge participation at, say, Eastover and nothing at Lone Pine. So it's pretty consistent across the board, which is really nice to see in our demographic. So this is an example of where we're learning as we're building our own survey. Obviously, you don't know everything the first time that you do this. And so we learned last year, I fielded a ton of phone calls from people who said, I don't find myself reflected in this question because my children started in another public school and transitioned to Bloomfield Hills schools. That was not an option that we gave them in 2016. And so in 2017, we made sure not only did they have began in another public school and transitioned to Bloomfield Hills schools, but that they were also given an other. And every time we offer them that other checkbox, it is a blank field that they can also have some text entry so that we can find out what are we missing, what did we not include. So obviously you can see 22% is a sizable number that started in another public school and transitioned to Bloomfield Hills schools. So then we asked them to identify the 3 most important factors when choosing an education institution for their children or are most important to them as a taxpayer. So this question was open to virtually all respondents. So we found that quality of staff came in at number 1 with 22%. And in some nice conversations with Todd, when you talk about how this works with our plans and how this works with our development as an organization, you can interpret quality of staff with the quality of practice, instruction, the actual delivery of curriculum. But curriculum did come in second, so quality of staff and curriculum are the top 2 priorities within the district. Class size came in at number 3, and then I thought that I would mention that standardized test scores came in at number 4. I was only going to give you the top 3, because that is the question we asked, but standardized test scores came in so close to class size that I included it here for your information, especially given that the next ones in line were around 7%. So these 4 really did rank the highest. So when we look at our strategic plan and we look at goal 1, because obviously we're working to use data to inform our decisions and inform our planning, you see that goal 1 is to ignite the passion, fuel dreams, and create a personal world-class experience for every student. So we asked our families who identified as a parent or guardian how they feel about the following related to their child's school or district. And what's interesting to see here is that if standardized testing is the number 4th most important item, how might that contribute to how people feel about ELA instruction? How do they feel about math instruction? So it's interesting to start beginning to look at how they feel, how they perceive instruction, what's important to them. And then obviously here I pointed to objective 1.0 and 1.5 under goal 1, increased proficiency in literacy and mathematics. Now, so this is where we can drill a little bit down in the data and answer some questions. So when we have questions about data, now that we own that data and we own those results, we can actually drill down. And Qualtrics is a very robust tool that allows us to answer questions. So one of the questions that sprung up was, how do people feel about ELA instruction in Bloomfield Hills schools versus how do they feel about ELA instruction in private school, homeschool, not yet school age? So this is an example of breaking that out. Now in the top right box, what's interesting to note there is that it's the excellent or good put together. And so all those, yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt. What does it mean? How do you feel? Do you feel we're doing a good job? Is this important to you? I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
It would be a perception of performance.
Okay.
Yep, it would be a perception of performance. So this is their perception of performance based on what are they reading in the newspaper? What are our test scores? What are students saying? Where are graduates attending universities? So there's a variety of factors that someone might use to say, boy, I feel great about ELA instruction. So this is an example, and your question's a great one because that is a question that we could then use to build a secondary survey where we might resurvey this particular audience and say, thank you so much for taking our initial survey. So if we had collected their email addresses, we did not, this was an anonymous survey, but had we collected their email addresses, we might resurvey them and say, boy, you know, there was some interesting feedback about how you feel about ELA instruction, and we'd like to understand more. How do you value ELA? How do you, right? So we might drill down by asking some additional questions, which then might shed some more light on it.
Because to me, I just wasn't sure if everybody understood the question they were answering. Maybe I'm being a lawyer too much, I don't know.
And it's entirely possible that they didn't. And we get some of that feedback in that other box where someone will hit other and say, I didn't understand your question. And then that's something that we can reflect upon. I also get, by the way, a bevy of emails and phone calls when this is issued. So people contact our office directly, and we quickly can learn what questions they're stumbling on, what questions they don't understand. We also learn year-over-year data. When we get that feedback, it's a time for us to reflect and adjust. So this was not a question that we had that feedback. Like I mentioned, we did on the other one.
So, Shira, to follow up on Mark's question, is it how does the person feel? How important is the issue, or how are we as a school district doing in providing that service?
So I went back one slide because this is actually exactly how the question is phrased on the survey. Please tell us how you feel about the following related to your child's school or district.
Okay, so it's how we're doing, performing that task.
Or whatever district they're in.
Or exactly.
Correct, and that's why I broke this out for you, because it's really interesting to see how the data shifts, or where we might be running somewhat parallel, like Bloomfield Hills schools and private schools, you know, came in about the same in terms of perception on ELA.
Once you get, I don't know when to ask this, but a couple slides back you were showing private, and I was seeing the private was largely, I thought, before their school age. Is that not true? One of the slides you were showing the age, and it was showing 0 to 1, and I thought it was saying that most of the people that were responding, and they say they're in private, were actually talking about preschool.
So we asked the question about, are you in private school, are you not yet school age? And they did have the opportunity of selecting both. So they might say, I'm not yet school age and I'm in private school, which we can then assume is private preschool. But for the survey results that I'm showing you, we primarily wanted to just split out public and private, or homeschool or charter, just so we can better understand.
So getting to the recent slide, so to just summarize for my benefit, maybe others as well. So the people who are filling this out as private, going to private schools versus BHS, they feel very similar in terms of the ELA education.
Correct.
So if you had 20 people who are in private schools, 20 people, it's kind of even, you know, they feel the same.
Correct, and that's what you can see from this slide. So that's it. It was very interesting to see. The other thing that I found interesting was in the homeschool category, if you note, there's no rating in the excellent column. So it was either good, average, or poor So I thought that was fascinating. So again, this is the opportunity for us to potentially resurvey this audience, especially if we have their direct contact information, which again, I'll reiterate, we do not. This is an anonymous survey. But if we were to collect their information, we could resurvey them to dig a little deeper. And we can certainly use the data that we have on hand to dig a little deeper. So if there are questions that we have, I can look at the data that we have to see if it might answer the question or get close.
Are we considering, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so this is saying that this perception of families that are children that are not yet school age, that we have excellent English language instruction.
That they believe their English language instruction is excellent. So whether
In
that means
preschool.
that they're working on it at home, in preschool, whatever that child is participating in. Yep. Okay, so again, this is another one where we said, please review the following statements and then make your selection. And again, being excellent, good, average, poor, fair, or terrible, sorry. So in terms of how they feel about instruction and the value that it has, we thought that this related very well to Goal 1, Objective 2 in terms of cultivating and nurturing the development of global and cultural competencies. Especially when you consider in the top right where it says time and space for creative thinking is of great value in a child's education. And it's nice to see that generally speaking, something that we value and we strive for is something that is also valued by our community, as you can see with a 3.72. So
What is the difference between the green? All right, so the blue, so what is the difference between the blue and the green?
So typically under 3.0, it will start to go blue just so that you can visually see. It's a visual cue for someone looking at this data that you may want to take a look at that one, that you're sliding back a little
I'm
bit.
just seeing on the,
Or that there's not a lot of
there's a
agreement.
2.56 and that's a
Maybe
green.
it's 2.5.
so-
Maybe
Yeah.
it's less than 2.5. It's
Right,
like less than 2.5.
So maybe 2.5 is the cut point.
right.
Okay.
There's a cut point where it becomes blue.
Okay, thank you.
Just visual identification. So we're getting into our staff section a little bit here, and I did structure this originally based on the order that the questions were presented, and then restructured this presentation for you today to align with our goals and our objectives. So we're going to jump around just a little bit, but we're in the staff section right now, and we asked staff, how long have you worked in Bloomfield Hills Schools? Again, the 2016 data is in green, and 2017 is in blue. And again, so objective 3 in terms of deepening student learning by intentionally developing teachers' leadership cohorts is really reinforced here when you see how many senior staff we have and how ready they are for those leadership opportunities.
Does it factor in, like, if there's someone that comes from another district that has 15 years experience, so would they be less than 6 months?
So the question is specifically phrased, how long have you worked in Bloomfield Hills Schools, so that we can learn how new are you here, not necessarily how much teaching experience do you have. And again, this is how long have you worked in Bloomfield Hills Schools. So we're capturing not just teachers, we're capturing bus drivers, we're capturing administrators. Anyone who took this survey that would identify themselves as a staff member is captured in this question. So if we get back a little bit to how parents are feeling, we can ask them how they feel about the following related to their child's teacher. And again, in here, we look at ability to motivate, organization, ability to develop strong, caring relationships, communication. So some of these things we look at each year, and hopefully we see some growth.
Sure,
Yes.
just on that, I just know from my world of surveys, they're all anonymous, so someone who's terrible, there's no way to figure out who that is and reach out to them and ask them why it's a terrible experience.
Correct. We do ask, so this, believe it or not, this is a very abbreviated version of this data. We do ask a lot of open-ended questions after questions like this that will be phrased similarly to how could we improve your experience, or depending on how you rated us, why are you having such an excellent experience, or why are you having such a terrible experience, and how can we get better? Sometimes we ask a very open-ended, is there anything that you believe we could improve upon? And we can structure these questions in a variety of ways so that if they do choose terrible, they see an open-ended. If they choose excellent, they don't and they move on. We've elected typically to show the open-ended box to everyone because we believe whether you've rated us terrible or excellent, you probably have some feedback for us. So again, please tell us how you feel related to your child's school or district. I pulled this one out in particular, the technology integration, because that is objective 4 of Goal 1 in our strategic plan. And again, I did break it out, Bloomfield Hills Schools, private, homeschool, not yet school age, etc. So now we get into Goal 2, which is my sort of goal area. So in terms of making learning visible and providing a deeper connection to the day-to-day school experience, this is one that I pay particular attention to when our survey results come back, and it's the one that says, I feel connected as a partner in my child's education. So this is an interesting one for us to pay attention to because it is how they feel about being partners in education with us. And I believe that we have a very strong core value that we are partners with parents and guardians and all family members in a child's learning experience. So one of the things that I did when I was diving deeper is I took a look grade level because I had this hypothesis that perhaps there's a particular grade where we might start to dip or drop in that perception of feeling connected from a parent or guardian lens. And in fact, if you start to look at those older grade levels, the green, which is excellent, is dipped a little bit lower. The yellow kind of starts to level off. That gray bar starts to creep up a little bit. So we know that students get a little older, they begin to take their own leadership roles, their own responsibility, which tends to kind of naturally back off the parent or guardian role. So we're not checking backpacks every night, we're not doing those things. So how can we engage with that particular parent and guardian audience so that they feel more connected? Because that natural dip and drop is correlating with a feeling that we don't necessarily want our parents and guardians to have. We want them to feel very connected all the way through. So then we asked this question, how should we communicate with you? This is the one that talks about frequency and sent in a timely manner in terms of communication. What's interesting is, again, we learned something. So last year we phrased one of them sent too often. And what we learned was that wasn't necessarily good phrasing that aligned well with the way that we asked all the other ones. So this year we said sent at an appropriate frequency. So we can kind of see how that goes. So in terms of improving stakeholder experiences and increasing general stakeholder engagement, we asked them to talk about their experiences with us. And this is something that aligns very well with the service standards work that I'm doing this year. So in terms of being able to reach the right person, receiving an accurate response, issue handled quickly, the overall service experience is more positive from a 3.21 to a 3.25, not the jump that we hope to see. And certainly next year, I hope I'm in front of you with a big sizable jump, but we know that that work takes time. So we asked two separate questions. We asked how welcomed stakeholders felt in our schools, and we asked how respected stakeholders felt. In our world, those are two separate questions. Then what I did for you here is aligned them next to each other. So this isn't last year and this year, this was a new question for us this year, part of our global education work. And in terms of feeling welcomed and respected, it didn't always exactly align, which is an interesting thing to see. So the next thing that I did was I broke this out and I said, okay, so how respected do you feel if you are a parent or guardian? So if you identified as a parent or guardian, generally speaking, you feel very respected or extremely respected. But then if we look at this blue box, of those who identified as a resident without children in Bloomfield Hills schools, they don't feel very respected in our schools. So we need to drill down into that. Again, this is the first year of data. So unfortunately, it's not that we have last year's data to compare to. Next year we will. And now that we know this from this year's data, we can embed a few more questions in there so that if they say not respected at all, or if they say slightly respected, we can ask them a few follow-up questions. Try to learn more. So we asked staff to indicate their level of agreement with the following statements. And we looked at this in terms of Objective 2, Goal 2, Objective 2, connect the daily work to the core mission of our organization, which really is the why, what we do. Okay, and so what's interesting to note here is the jump that we saw in feeling a sense of purpose in their role with Bloomfield Hills Schools. This is really great to see. We hope that it keeps climbing and climbing even more. This is a really great one to see. We asked staff if they would advise a friend to apply for a job in Bloomfield Hills Schools, and this year 36% said definitely, as opposed to last year just 28%. We also saw a jump in our probably category, so it's not that they all moved to not sure or probably not. We had some really, really nice growth here.
Is there any breakdown between teachers and non-teaching staff?
That would be a great question, and we certainly could answer that with the survey data. I don't have that slide for you today, but we did ask them to identify, are you a teacher, administrator, bus driver? And so we certainly could pair this with that data and find out.
Shira, for staff, does that include people that are contractors with the district at this point?
We didn't include that as a category. They would have had to have selected other and then put that in, which I really did not see a lot of GRBS or Aramark coming in there.
Okay.
Overall, how satisfied are you in Bloomfield Hills Schools? This was a question that we asked to staff. And then to help the district communicate with you, oh, yep.
Yeah, okay. Yep. Thank you.
To help the district communicate with you, we asked about communication preferences. So again, you know, the lower the score, the higher the preference. It's kind of one of those weird ones, but this was the best way for me to illustrate it to you. Really what it boils down to is that the highest preference by far is email, followed by text message, phone, website, and mail. This is the Net Promoter Score, or NPS, and this is something that not just organizations are using, but now school districts are also starting to use it and weave it into their strategic planning. So this is one of my personal KPIs on Objective 3 of Goal 2, is our NPS score. So this is something that I'm looking at. And essentially, we ask you, how likely are you to recommend Bloomfield Hills Schools to someone else? And then we track that. And so as you can see, I gave you the scale just so that you can understand that if there's 0 to 6, so if I said about a 6, I'm considered a detractor. So I actually count against the score. 7 or 8 is considered passive, and only a 9 or 10 is considered to be a promoter. I also give you the bar chart because sometimes the 36.29 or 36.55 doesn't tell you a lot or can be a little unsettling to make it sound that low. But you can see 10s and 9s and 8s, so we're doing quite well. Then in terms of Goal 3, maximizing the community's investment, we looked at, so this was a new question for us this year, and we said, on which of the following segments would you like us to focus more of our time and financial resources? And then I'm going to show you another way to look at this as well. But you can see here athletic spaces, fine arts spaces, and so we asked them to kind of put those in priority order. We did only allow them to select one. So this wasn't a ranking order, this was pick one.
Could that be a function of who filled out the survey?
I'm sorry?
Could that be a function of who filled out the survey? I don't know, are the majority elementary school parents versus?
Well, what's interesting is when you look at the breakdown of where does your child attend school, that high school is a significantly large bar. So there was a really nice distribution of all grade levels and all buildings represented. So as we look at this and you see that lunch facilities, 42% of those who took the survey would like for us to focus our time there at the elementary level, that's a significant number. And then obviously, recess and extracurricular spaces. Now, had we phrased it slightly differently and maybe not used the word recess, you might have seen a swing somewhere else if we had called it club spaces or co-curricular spaces. So a lot of it is on the phrasing, and we do talk a lot about how are we going to phrase this question. We consult a lot with Oakland schools. We talk a lot with Qualtrics about what's best practice, because they do have other education clients. And so we talk to them about how are we going to phrase these questions, so we try to get the data we're looking for and not something that's skewed because of the way we ask the question. That said, we learn things every year. So again, here's technology, safety, security. And then, of course, general layout, 40% at the elementary. Again, that's a sizable amount. Any questions?
Great work.
A lot of data.
It's a lot of data, but the data tells a story. And we're learning more about our story as a district and our stakeholders' story and how they're experiencing Bloomfield Hills schools. And we know that perception is 99.9% reality. So whether or not we believe that we're doing something only matters if they believe we're doing it too.
So are there any low-hanging fruit that you would say that we gathered from this feedback that we are going to immediately, work on?
So all of this data was used to help inform our goals, our strategic plan for the school year. And then we tried to pick the ones that we can attack at the same time, because there's a lot of information in here that I think we'd love to run straight toward and try to resolve all of it. That said, we're human. So we pick what we can and weave that into our strategic plan and work every year to get better. That said, I think we certainly have to take a look at where people would like us to spend our time and our financial resources. Certainly work with service standards, because that'll improve a lot of this. I know in our department, we're gonna focus a lot on communication and retargeting our focus on engagement, because we're hearing that stakeholders of all varieties don't feel as engaged as we'd like them to be. Certainly in the world of noise, with cell phones and devices and things coming at you from all different angles, that's a challenge, but challenge accepted. Good. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Shira. Okay, so next up, we are going to be having a report from Cory Donberger, who's going to be talking with us about security. And as he comes forward, I think Dr. Glassman might say a couple of words, but as we're talking about security, one of our core values of our school district is to be watchful of the emotional and physical safety of our students and our staff members. And at a time when our world is in a very shaky place, it's a good time to have an update about how we're taking care of our community.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me as well tonight. I would actually, like to start off with the Board of Education goal number 5, which states support administration in maintaining an educational environment that promotes emotional and physical safety. I have mentioned this publicly before, but it is, I've been very fortunate to, as a police officer, to work alongside with Bloomfield Hills School, so I definitely appreciate that. Whether it's in my current security role or my days at Lasser High School as a liaison officer, my role, or as a bigger picture, our role as a police department, has always been to support the building administration. Whether that's through our daily conversation with students, staff, or parents, or standing in the high school parent loop, our goals have been to be an additional resource to provide assistance and offering guidance when needed. This also extends to our working relationship with our neighboring area police departments. Whether it's a school complaint or another type of community incident, we definitely rely on them, and also vice versa. They also reach out to us. Your district is unique, where you do have some property that is located in another jurisdiction, as we are unique, and we have Birmingham schools and quite a number of private schools as well. So that's pretty common for us to go outside of those boundaries, if you will, if we do need assistance or if they do. Moving on to the safety drills. State laws have changed in recent years that have increased the number of drills that need to be conducted during the course of the school year. I do take part in these drills, especially the lockdown. Those are obviously very sensitive to me, not just to assist necessarily, but to identify ways we can improve or if there are any potential problems with the current way that we are doing them. Per the Oakland County Homeland Security Office, the district is in compliance in completing those each year, so that is encouraging. I do get a weekly email, so I know very quickly when one is not being done. The building's EpiPens, AEDs, and the District 911 system are checked each month. Obviously, as technology changes and we move into the E911, that will be a good system district-wide, obviously, but those are checked. And if there are problems, I do work very closely with the technology department to ensure that those are fixed as quick as possible. Reference to facility security. Buildings are still utilizing the main door camera buzzer systems, which provides a better accountability as to who is coming into the building. During the last few years, lockdown security devices at and the high school mass notification system have been installed. They are routinely tested and used during the course of the drills. Also, we've looked at ways to improve upon or to add new door access systems district-wide, alarm systems, particular with the Losser High School site. Additional camera systems are always a top of conversation with the technology department as to how we can keep the district and the buildings specifically safer. And finally, with ongoing responsibilities. So this past week has definitely shown us that violent acts can occur anywhere at any time. When I first started this position, I remember in my interview process, I had my wife and 2 children currently in one educational building at the time, and I remember that being very important to me in the interview process because at any given time, one incident could take my entire family out. So my goals back then and even to today are basically twofold. 1, to provide more presence in your buildings, and 2, continue the conversation with staff, students, administration, that we do need to be more security-minded. I believe we do a great job now, but there's always room for improvement, and I think that always needs to be in the back of our mind that we can do better. Whether it's monitoring student arrival or dismissal times and service training scenarios with the transportation department, or conducting tabletop scenarios with the high school staff, our efforts, meaning police and school district, together certainly support your 5th goal in making a safer environment for all of us. So, if there's any questions or any follow-ups I can provide.
Any questions for Cory?
I guess I have one. You came with us before. By the way, thank you so much. This is so, so important to all of us. One thing that I wanted to just bring up, I know you come with us to the DARE meetings, and they talked about restorative justice, and something that sometimes some of our families talk about is how do we use restorative justice. For example, if one of our students make a mistake and maybe they're going to be charged, could you walk us through that? Just because I know you were part of that discussion, and I want to make sure that.
I guess I'll need a little bit further as to what would the process look like on.
Yeah. So at DARE, there was a discussion about with restorative justice or practices, if one of our students perhaps came to the attention of the police department and they were in school, and what would be our practice? What would be your practice or our practice on how that student would be removed from school if they needed to be interviewed? Because they might have done something.
Okay, so I think it's maybe a twofold, but
Okay.
obviously correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
So the first part would be, what would our role be necessarily? Probably not. If we were a part of that conversation, so to speak, essentially evidence could be provided to us as law enforcement that could obviously hurt them. And as far as removal from the building, that would be a pretty rare circumstance that we would do that. There have been times in the past where we've done that, but it has to be a pretty rare circumstance. And majority of the time, we work pretty closely with administrators if we are going to do that. So I've always had the thought process that your buildings are your buildings. And we are not going to dictate how you run your buildings. We're a resource, as mentioned earlier, but clearly things happen and people need to be removed, whether a current incident that just occurred or a warrant or something like that that we currently have in the system. But for the most part, we work pretty closely with administration if we're going to come into your building and do that.
Thanks.
And then try to be as less disruptive as we can,
Okay.
obviously.
Last night, Howard and I, along with Rob and Andy Geniak and Melanie Brooks, attended a presentation on OK to Say. And the presenter was from our Attorney General's office. And he talked a little bit about the connection between and collaboration with police department, with schools on issues that might arise regarding sexting or bullying or any other kind of threat that might occur that might be reported anonymously by a member of our school community. Can you just sort of talk about a little bit how that connection would occur?
Sure. Probably a couple months ago in a cabinet meeting that was discussed, and the decision was to move towards more of a consistent notification system, if you will. So I did take it upon myself to update the entire OK to Say database, if you will, for Bloomfield Hills schools. So those key people, whether it's building principal, building director, are in a position to get those notifications, as well as myself. So that way we could streamline the information that comes in. Sometimes there is a lag in the system, if you will, if they don't know which police department to contact. We have West Bloomfield, Bloomfield Township, we have the Village, we have Bloomfield Hills. And sometimes there's a lag in the system depending on what the caller provides. So this way, that information will immediately come to me or the building principal or director, and then we can jump right over on whatever has surfaced at that time. So our tips, so to speak, are not, I don't know how many we've had. We've had some in the past, but not a huge amounts, obviously. But if we can get a jump start on any, type of incident before school starts the next day or something like that, I mean, obviously that's better for us.
Okay, Howard?
When we opened the new high school building, we installed what I call the blue light special, or the lockdown notification system. Could you give us a little report in terms of how that's actually worked in the high school for the last 2 years, and whether we're considering rolling that out to other buildings?
Sure. It's called Blue Point. They're based out of Chicago, and it really addressed the issue that we had early on, even before the high school construction, was how do we reach the deaf and hard of hearing community? We have a system in Eastover that's outdated. The company is no longer in business. It's not functional 100% of the time, so we were looking for additional ways to, now that we have a clean slate, so to speak, with the high school, what type of system, can we look into getting? So originally started, much sooner than that to reach, that population. And it currently is working in the high school. We do test it routinely. There's a lot of components to it, whether it's technology, whether it's the PA system. Obviously, the fire alarm is tied into it because of certain things that it does. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes, not just within the building, but also, I guess, in cyber world as far as notification goes. But we do test it routinely. We use it during the drills. We do look to make modifications when need be. But so far, I think it's accomplishing what we need it to do. There's no question the high school is a large, open, huge building. And if we can get that notification out quicker to every person, not just a small community, but everybody, then that allows for us to have a better response in the event that something is to occur.
What about the possibility of expanding it to other buildings?
So with everything, it's cost. Ideally, yeah, I think it would be great in all of your buildings, especially East Hills and Eastover, since those are still buildings within your district that house the deaf and hard of hearing. But I think in any building, I think it's a huge benefit. If we've seen over the past few incidents where violence have knocked on the door, sometimes the best option is to get out. Other times it's to lock down. Other time it may be something else. But it's that quick notification that we have started to see throughout a lot of these incidents that is what's going to help us in the end. Is if we can save time, if we can get that notification piece out sooner, then we're going to be much better for it.
Any other questions from the board, from Cory?
Just as an individual, Cory, I'd like to thank you and all of your colleagues in the Public Safety Department for your service to our community, and really appreciate the fact that you're involved in the DARE initiative. I believe it sends a strong signal to our community that the police department and the public safety in general and the school district are working very closely together to protect the safety and security of everyone within the district. So, including their rights. I appreciate that very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carrie. All right, next we'll move on into our general discussion time. I just want to mention one of the things I forgot to bring up earlier, that on Monday evening is our college night at our Bloomfield Hills High School. And it's usually a pretty exciting night to see all of the colleges and universities that come and for our students to learn about what is being offered for their next transition. And I'm looking forward to going and talking with them and hearing how they work with our students. So I encourage everybody to get out and meet with some of our college recruiters and hear what they have to say. It's a great opportunity. I really enjoy going to it.
I have an announcement too.
Yes.
So Superintendent Glass mentioned our awesome Bloomfield Township open house this weekend. It was fantastic, and all of the different buildings really brought some really very informative but also very fun activities. And I just want to mention that the fire department had a drawing, and so I was fortunate enough to get a carbon monoxide detector. But when I was picking it up from our fire department, our Bloomfield Township Fire Department, they mentioned to me that they have a FEMA grant where they can provide free fire and alarm clocks for individuals who have hearing loss or who are deaf and hard of hearing. And actually, we're going to scan it, and next week we'll be able to show it up on our screen, and maybe we can send it out through our listserv. But our fire department actually come to these individuals' house, and they install it above the bed. And if something should happen, it actually shakes the bed in order to wake the individual up, since they cannot hear a fire alarm. And so the person to talk to, and we're going to scan it and share it. And so not only our own residents in Bloomfield Township, but the students that attend our centers for our deaf and hard of hearing, they can also contact Lieutenant Ryan Hush. His number is 248-433-7745, and rhush@bloomfieldtownship.org. But we will scan it and get it out to everyone.
Very good, thank you. Anything else? Okay, then, Mr. Ford, would you like to give us the report of the instruction committee, please?
Yes. We had a report out. Primarily, our focus was on literacy, some of the things that Mr. Glass mentioned. And also, at the end of the meeting, Todd provided us a list of potential subjects that we could discuss where the LST would actually prepare specific material on that particular subject. So I'm collecting input. I've gotten Jackie's input. I've gotten Howard's input. I want to talk to you, Madam President, because I know you are a regular attender at our meetings. And we'll consensus on 3 items and get those back to Todd so him and his team can start focusing on that, and we can get those on future agendas for the meetings. But I thought it was a very good discussion, and as I told Todd and his team at the beginning of the meeting, I am so proud of the work that the LST is doing right now. I couldn't be happier. The approach is very methodical, it's fact-based, it's very strategic, and it has everything to do with helping us achieve our academic goals for the district. And I just can't say enough good things about the team and the staff that they're helping to lead, and it's just great to be a part of this district. It's just amazing what's going on, so.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cullen, would you like to report on our Finance Committee?
Yes, so we met, and our focus was going through, we had a financial audit presentation by our auditors, and we got a gold standard. Our financials are sound, and we're the benchmark for other districts. So accolades go to Tina, Kathy, and her team, who are not here. They're probably working. That's why we got gold standard and everything, all the accolades.
And Karen.
What?
And Karen.
Karen. So that was first point. Second point, we're focused right now on sinking fund planning, both on the renewal aspect. It's going to be coming up for a vote down the road, and also Brian presented sort of, his vision for projects that are coming up in the upcoming years. And then the third, which was on our consent agenda, was to renew the contracts for French Associates and Barton Malow.
Very good. Any questions for Paul? Excellent. Okay, very good. Then we can move on into our board business. And first this evening, we're going to hear from our Assistant Superintendent, Christine Barnett.
Is there any public comment?
Oh, sorry, yes. Do we have any public comment? No cards. Christine, could you please bring us along on our first reading on the Uniform Code of Student Conduct for our policy number 5301?
Okay. Let's say I'm gracing you with a PowerPoint this evening, just because it might be easier to go through it. So in August of this year, the legislature made some changes to suspension and expulsion rules for kids. So we are changing our code of conduct. One of the primary drivers of this was in 1999, there was a whole series of laws in Michigan that were enacted to deal with Columbine. Thank you. I don't know what you pressed, but it's good. Okay. So in 1999, we have zero tolerance, and zero tolerance is a real problem. It took away really the discretion and the flexibility of the school district to look at a kid as an individual and say, what is it that would best fit the consequences for the Child's Act? And really, in certain situations, that flexibility was just taken away from everybody in a public school. So, and we had to suspend or we had to expel in certain situations. Primarily, those situations were physical assaults, the rape, arson, or possession of a dangerous weapon in school. So the rape and arson stays. That's still a mandatory expulsion. And I'll talk a little bit about the possession of a firearm towards the end. That still hasn't changed either, except there is a little flexibility there that was there before, and then an addition. So the new law basically says, school districts, before you do anything, you must any suspension or any expulsion, there's factors that you must consider. And I will tell you that those are factors that we are considering anyway, but there is something new in there. So age of the student, child's disciplinary record, whether the student has a disability, seriousness of the violation, whether the safety of any student or staff member was threatened, and this is a new one, whether restorative practices will be used, and we must consider that in all situations, and whether a lesser intervention would address the violation or behavior. So I would say pretty much that's what we use anyway, and we have been using restorative practices as an option if it fits. And thank goodness we've got Bill Boyle that came back and got the training and was here in this building today, training additional staff. And really the majority of our staff have been trained or will be trained in restorative practices. So now the new law says for any suspension or basically exclusion from school for more than 10 days, there is basically a presumption that it's not required. We should not be suspending or expelling somebody. So that's the presumption, which can be rebutted when the school administration presents its case as to why recommendation for suspension or expulsion is being considered. And again, you look at all the factors, and then you make a decision or make a recommendation. And it would get to the Board of Education level for sure of anything, any expulsion is going to get to the Board of Education. And any suspension over 10 days that the parent wants a full due process hearing could end up at the Board of Education. There's some level processes, but there is a possibility of getting to you eventually.
Could you just side to comment? In the past 3 years, do you know about how many expulsions we've had that have been over 10 days?
So suspensions over 10 days or expulsions. I would say for the most part, I don't recall any, anything like that. Now, there have been situations, however, where we've had somebody under the mandatory expulsion situation and those students have tended to withdraw. So sometimes kids bring a dangerous weapon to school. And sometimes if they intended to use it or were using it for defense or whatever it is, that's depending on the size, or if it was a knife, that kind of thing, depending on the size or what was going on, there's a chance that that person withdrew from our school district. So I'm saying we haven't had any formal expulsions, but we've had situations where students met the mandatory expulsion requirement that withdrew from school. So now we have definitions of suspension and expulsion. We actually didn't have those definitions before. As far as a legal definition, we basically used semesters as our guide, and expulsion was pretty clear. It was for 180 days, basically a full school year or more. So suspend means basically you're out of school for a period of fewer than 60 days. If it's 60 days or more, it's considered an expulsion under the revised school code. This is where restorative practices come in. So what they are, and you talked about them a little bit more, but basically it's a way of bringing people together and hoping that bringing them together in a way will basically get them to talk to each other again and deal with the issues that are in front of them. Because if all kids are in school, they're all in school together, they have to continue to see each other and hopefully get along, and this is one way of addressing the situation. So, and it really should be, according to the law, the first consideration in any cases such as, and they make sense, interpersonal conflicts, that makes sense, verbal and physical conflicts, theft, damage to property, class disruption and harassment, bullying, or cyberbullying. So we definitely have to consider restorative practice in those particular instances. This is kind of it's a chart that gives you kind of an idea of what it was like before August 1st and what it's been like since August 1st. So I got on the left side, there's the revised school code section. And the triggering offense, and I'm going to go through them. The first one is under section 1310. So if somebody was in 6th grade or more and they committed a physical assault against another student at school, what we were required to do was we shall suspend. We didn't have choices. You shall suspend for up to 180 days. So we had some discretion because it was up to 180 days. So it didn't have to be 180 days, but it could have been. And now, basically, before we do anything, we shall consider those factors that I mentioned before. The next section is 1311.2, and then if you possess a dangerous weapon at school, commit arson, or criminal sexual conduct at school, before the student shall be expelled permanently, subject to a petition for reinstatement. Now, before expulsion, we must consider the factors that I mentioned before. with the exception of having a gun in school. And so we don't have to consider those factors in. It's why is that, and it's a dangerous weapon, it's in school, no gun should be at school. The next section is 1311A. If pupils enrolled in grade 6 or above, that they commit a physical assault against an employee, volunteer, or contractor, then the school shall expel. That's the former law. We shall expel permanently, again, subject to a petition for reinstatement that comes to the Board of Education. But now we must consider the factors above. And then lastly, if a pupil is guilty of a gross misdemeanor, basically, or persistent disobedience, that's just a catch-all. You know, it could be violation of some laws at school. It could be physical assault. It could be some theft. It could be fighting with other kids. It could be a whole variety of things. And so before, we may suspend or expel. So we did have some flexibility there. Now, we still may suspend or expel, but we must consider the factors that I mentioned before. Here we go with possession of a dangerous weapon. So that really hasn't changed much and probably shouldn't, but it's not required if the student has no previous history of suspension or expulsion, and that's new. This previous history of suspension or expulsion is new and can establish one of the following. So first, the object wasn't possessed to be used as a weapon or to delivery to somebody else to be used as a weapon. The student didn't really know that they had the weapon. So sometimes kids have gone hunting on weekends with parents, and they've come back, and it's in their backpack, and they've come to school, and they didn't intend to bring it to school. That would be a situation that we would say the student did not knowingly possess the weapon. The student didn't know the object constituted a dangerous weapon. So sometimes that's the truth with knives. Kids are using it maybe to skin fish, fillet fish, that kind of thing. If it could happen. They never thought of it as a dangerous weapon. That requires a lot of discussing with the child, discussing with the parent to see what really the intent was or lack of intent. And the last one is if the student had that dangerous weapon at the direction of the school district, with permission of the school district or the police authorities. So that's it. There is a whole section I didn't go into. It's in the Code of Conduct that you have for first reading. There's a whole section on reinstatement, and it involves the board. It involves committees with board members on it, administrators on it, community members, administrators. There's a whole section, but I'm hoping we'll never have to deal with that. But if we do, we have a process to use.
I got a question for you. Last night in the OK to Save presentation that we heard from the Attorney General's office, there was some conversation about the consequences of sexting. And I'm wondering, it's in law, we don't have options about it, but if it would make some sense to have some language about what the legal consequences are for sexting to be in our Code of Conduct, because I was a little surprised at how severe they really are.
Okay, that's something that to consider. There are serious consequences, and I think kids don't get the fact that sexting is not something they should be doing. And it's, I think this kids spread it around. It's like no big deal to them. It's a big deal to
Even having the pictures on their phone could
Right.
have long-time life consequences in terms of what would be on their long-term record and what, being and possibly being put on a sexual predators list. I mean, consequences are pretty severe, even for younger. He was talking about fifth graders, kids who had some pretty severe consequences.
Yes, things have changed dramatically. In the past, which has nothing really to do with this, but in the past I've had discussions with students when I was asked to speak to them when we talk about statutory rape, which got everybody's attention because kids don't really understand the consequences. It may be close in age, maybe far apart in age. They don't understand those consequences, and a lot of our students' definition of sexual conduct is different than the law's definition of sexual conduct. So there's a lot of education that parents should be involved in with their kids, and I don't know what that discussion goes on in our health classes or not. I really don't know that just because I'm not in the classroom. But those are discussions I think that adults should be having with kids.
Thank you. Any questions for Chris? Howard?
Following up on the OK to Say last night, the OK to Say program, which is a reporting system anonymous to the state, and then it comes back down to the school buildings, is an incredibly robust program. The interesting thing is, in tying it into your presentation, the other states in the country, in terms of whether they are doing it or not, the only other state that's doing anything close to what we're doing is Colorado, because of Columbine. So we are really on the leading edge with Colorado of having this kind of program, and it's amazing, after 18 years after Columbine, very few states, or hardly any, have really adopted this kind of a program.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Chris?
Yes, just to follow up, I asked about the expulsions and suspensions, and I remember one time hearing about a child bringing a hunting knife in their backpack. But in the past 3 years, has there been any incidents at all, something like that?
Like somebody bringing a hunting knife unintentionally to school?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that, but I'm not in the buildings when they're dealing with that.
Okay.
But none has come to my attention.
Okay.
A lot of this in the state legislature, I don't remember which school district it was, but some children did have a hunting knife or some sort of knives buried in the backpack, and the school was having to follow the law, even though it was an innocent mistake on the student's part. It wasn't our school district, but there were other school districts that had it, which caused the legislature to say, we need to do something about this.
Yeah, my kids have been in school since 96, I guess, been here a long time. I just remember one time ever, and it was sent out to all the parents that it had happened. I think it might have been before Rob, but it was a child, I mean, quite like a second grader or something. And they went hunting, and like you said, and they didn't really realize it, so. But that's like 20-some years, I only heard of one incident. But, so it's very rare. I just wanted to establish fact, doesn't really happen very, to us. Thanks. To our wonderful
Times have
community.
changed.
Yeah.
They have.
Like it was in Boy Scouts, they were required to have a knife as part of,
Yeah,
a Boy
pocket
Scout
knife.
always have a pocket knife, and they had meetings in the school, so times have changed. I think it was Holt. Yep. Anything else?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. And then we have one other item of board business this evening, and that is to approve attendance for the National School Board Association Advocacy Institute in Washington. This is an event that occurs annually where board members have the opportunity to learn about key national issues in public education, and then go en masse with board members from across the country to Capitol Hill and be sure as a force on the Hill all at the same time that we're getting our clear messages across. And I would entertain a motion.
Yes, Madam President, I have a motion I would like to make in that regard.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Yes, Madam President, I move that the Board of Education authorize Cynthia Von Oyen and Howard Barron to attend the NSBA Advocacy Institute of the National School Boards Association from February 4th through 6th, 2018 in Washington, D.C.
Second.
I actually need to amend that motion a tad, because actually we will be going before that, because on the Saturday before this conference begins, there is an equity symposium, which Howard and Paul and I attended last year, which really is, I think, going to continue to help us consider issues of equity in school districts, as we have the national conversation about that. So we'll be going a day earlier.
And it looks like the costs take that into consideration, but just not the
Right,
rates at the time.
exactly.
So amended.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have any other comments to make? Then at this point, I would say thank you very much. Have a great evening. And we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.